All right, I'll go ahead and get us started with a few initial remarks. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TRB 2024 Annual Meeting Digital Infrastructure Activities Preview webinar. My name is Luana Brashears, and I'll facilitate today's webinar. Before we start, just let me give you a quick overview about NOCO resources related to digital infrastructure and operations research. So on our next slide. So here is just an example of we offer at NOCO. So at NOCO, we offer a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. You can go to the NOCO website, which is transportationops.org, to browse through links for TISMO resources and news. Previous webinar recordings and case studies can be accessed from there as well. So make sure that you go to NOCO's website and check all that information there. This is an example of a page that is in the NOCO website and is dedicated to the digital infrastructure activities, where you can find information on the National Strategy for Roadway Digital Infrastructure, as well as recent and upcoming engagement activities. So make sure you check that link out on the NOCO website and then just get more information on digital infrastructure activities. And then on our next slide, since we're talking about research, I just wanted to show you also another resource that is on the NOCO website. And this is the Research in Operations database. It's a centralized online repository for sharing and rating new transportation operations research ideas. NOCO maintains and supports this database with support from AASHTO. So you can create your free account from at the NOCO website that we're showing there. And a few things that you can do there. You can submit a new research idea into this database. You can search all the ideas that are already in the database. And you can also rate the ideas that were already submitted in this database. Ideas from TISMO-related research are welcome from practitioners across the transportation community, whether public or private sectors. These ideas form the basis from research priorities and recommendations for programs such as the NCHRP, US DOT, and pooled fund studies. Now, just a few logistics for today's webinar. We're recording this webinar, and the recording will be available on the NOCO website. All the attendees are encouraged to stay engaged by using the Q&A feature for questions and the chat feature for comments. So if you look, these are both at the bottom of your screen. We'll have a question and answer session at the end of all presentations. So if you have any questions, we encourage you to enter them in the Q&A area as they come to your mind at any time. Also, as always, please feel free to enter your name and agency in the chat to say hello to your peers. Now, just before we get started, we have an initial poll question that we just want to get to know a little more who is participating today. And then if you can just take a minute to answer this poll question, we just want to see which group do you represent? Are you representing federal government, state government, city, local government and planning organizations, academia, private sector, or any other sector? So just, I know you're already saying hi through the chat, but also if you can just let us know so we can have an idea of which group you are coming from and participating in this poll today. And I'll give a few more seconds and then I'll share so you can also have an idea of who is attending this webinar today. All right. So as you can see, most of our attendees today are from the private sector, but we do have a great number of participants from federal government, state government, city, local, and planning organizations, and also academia. So welcome again, everyone. And with that, I will hand it over to John Corbin from FHWA for some welcome remarks. John?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Luana, for that welcome and that kickoff, also for the fantastic assistance and guidance and support on behalf of the National Operations Center of Excellence in preparing for this webinar. A special thank you and welcome to all of you that are taking time to join today live. I know there also probably will be a good number of people listening to this recording, particularly over the holidays as we get ready for what is now less than a month away and the TRB annual meeting. The topic of transportation digital infrastructure in general and national roadway network digital infrastructure in particular really began probably in a transitional conversation about between 2016 and 2018 as digital infrastructure aspects of transformation within kind of the connected vehicle technology space parlayed into what were kind of nascent discussion of the cyber physical implications of automated vehicles for the National Roadway Network infrastructure system and systems. And as that kind of transition in conversation took place, we hosted something called the National Dialogue on Highway Automation in 2018. And what started out as a dialogue really has become a continuing conversation, and is, I think you will see both today and then at the TRB annual meeting, quickly pivoting from conversation to more active collaboration. Collaboration in which we begin to more purposefully and strategically leverage and focus, number one, key national partnerships, such as those represented on this call. Very grateful to illustrate today the active coordination and trusting collaboration between the Transportation Research Board, the Federal Highway Administration, the Joint Program Office, AASHTO, ITSA America, and that extends to other organizations like ITE, SAE, 5GA, and others. And so it is fundamentally about partnership between key national organizations and increasingly kind of voluntarily aligning and focusing our existing initiatives, existing programs, existing projects, existing activities, rather than making a multi-year business case for some dramatic, big, from scratch new enterprise. And so it's exciting. It's unprecedented in my personal experience in its scale and its intensity and its passion. And that's a tribute to those that you'll hear from momentarily, but also those of you that are joining this call. Before I just touch briefly on the agenda to clarify kind of how things will run, I did also want to acknowledge, in the context of collaboration, I believe this is the first more public NOCOE activity since yesterday's announcement of the award to my good friend and hero, Dr. Gopalakrishna Murthy, recognizing him as the TISMO champion through the TISMO Champion Award. And I can think of no better demonstration and honor to Gumata than to be demonstrating collaboration, since there are few, if any, people from whom I have learned more about collaboration between national organizations and across diverse groups than Dr. Murthy. So congratulations, Gumata. And we respect and honor you with this activity and our continued progress working with you. After I yield the floor in a moment, appreciate Deepak Gopalakrishna giving an overview of where we are. We not just being FHWA, but we and the other some of the other partner organizations to which I alluded earlier in advancing a national roadway digital infrastructure strategy. Appreciate Larry Dwyer from AASHTO being available to share AASHTO's vision, updated vision statement. I heard a great presentation yesterday at CTSO, at the Committee on Transportation System Operations, just reminding me what a fantastic process and document that vision statement it has proven to be, and within it a specific moonshot relative to digital infrastructure to light up the interstate. Also appreciate very appropriately Tim Drake and ITSA America kind of wrapping up the introductory portion of this webinar. Grateful to Tim and also to ITSA America for their compelling and strong leadership beginning a little over a year ago to create a digital infrastructure strategy as a focusing tool for USDOT, but also for other key partner organizations. We then want to equip you to engage both today, but also next month at the TRB Annual Meeting. We'll hear from Mike Haas talking about one of the workshops that literally will start the event and start an exciting week of collaboration on Sunday morning on the topic of data exchanges. Pete Marshall will share the continuing work that really is kind of a centerpiece for the technology of digital infrastructure, that being our existing traffic management systems and traffic management centers. And that's an ongoing conversation of TRB workshops that's been underway for a number of years. Appreciate Vaishali Shah representing what will be an equally interesting workshop. Yes, also on Sunday, on the integration between and the challenges of interface between our corporate information technology and our operational technology, or what could also be characterized as our office automation and our operations automation. And then finally, appreciate Valerie Schumann representing what we anticipate will kind of land TRB on Thursday morning. It'll be the second year we will have a workshop focusing on roadway digital infrastructure as a national strategic area of interest and collaborative effort. With that, I'll thank you again for joining and defer Deepak to you to start us progressing through the agenda.
Thank you, John, and a great welcome and agenda. I wanted to, for many of you, this might be sort of the start of your winding down to the holidays, so we appreciate you all joining during this busy time. What we do want to talk a little bit about is the shared strategic interest in defining what the National Roadway Digital Infrastructure is going to be. I'm going to spend the next 8 minutes or so presenting, followed by Larry and Tim. And what we are hoping to do is to give you a sense of commonality across the different ways we've approached this roadway digital infrastructure puzzle. And through that, we will sort of then pivot to how some of the workshops in 2024 are really advancing different elements of the strategy. As John very correctly said, one of the interesting and humbling things around this is there's a lot of work that's already going on that is part of roadway digital infrastructure. Roadway digital infrastructure exists today. Where do we go next is the question. I do also want to acknowledge several of sort of my team that's been working on that. I see Ted Bailey from STV on, Virginia Lingham, who was JCF now with WSP, she's on, and then some others as well. Laurie Mitkowski and Valerie Schumann and Dean Dieter have all sort of helped build some of the strategy efforts as well. So thank you for all your participation too. Again, as you hear from AASHTO and ITS America and me, I would encourage the audience to start looking for commonalities in how we are defining this, what used to be a fairly amorphous description. What is roadway digital infrastructure? We are slowly coalescing around the notion that it is the collective public and private technology assets that create user exchange data and provide services on the transportation system. A key to this definition is it's not just the data architecture, it's more than that. It's all the assets that need to be organized around the roadway to deliver services. And it's not just a single entity, it's the collective public and private assets. So this definition is slowly starting to coalesce in our mind, but also is becoming more consistent with some of the work that you'll see from AASHTO and ITS America as well. We also wanted to highlight the evolution that we move from our very successful and important ITS programs that have sort of really, all of us, many of us have sort of had our careers in, which moved from, which built all the infrastructure and the approaches that we see today. And they were largely based on these sort of civil engineering-led centralized device-to-device communication networks and really focused on vehicle mobility and safety. And slowly, as those programs have been evolving to include new capabilities around spectrum technology, edge computing, but also the public-private business models and looking at sort of procurement and partnerships and treating insights as a service. As we evolve our ITS programs, the need for us to take a more broader look beyond individual projects to the completeness of our digital infrastructure becomes critical. This evolution that we share in these slides is something that all of us see and experience, which is we've moved as a transportation ecosystem from being an infrastructure builder to an operator and maintainer to an infrastructure service provider, and we would move towards more of a service manager. And what that has meant is the infrastructure that used to support humans driving in their cars is slowly become, as smartphones came in, to needing to communicate with devices. As we get into 2010s, the post sort of smartphone era, we're starting to see a lot of private sector infrastructure supporting some of these capabilities as well. And in the future, we see a lot more need for machine-readable, seamless data exchange across a lot of devices, across a lot of public and private infrastructures, to deliver the growing set of services that we all expect on our transportation system. We've been sharing this equation as a way to make some of this RDI from a concept to something more practical. What we see this RDI really being leveraging our enterprise aspects of our ITSA investments that we've already have in place and being made. So how do we look across an individual project, but think about all that we need to manage and run across our ITS programs, plus the data and the information that needs to be now managed and be managed across our agency to generate insights. And then the complex interplay between the public and private digital infrastructure that really adds that sort of exponent to that equation. And this is something that we thought was a very easy to describe way to say, hey, RDI is more than just data. It's more than the ITS programs, but it's about thinking about the enterprise scale of some of these efforts and moving more from sort of a project-specific deployment to what we all need to accomplish. Just a few quick thoughts as we move forward. This is not just a federal highway thought in the Office of Operations. The idea of digital infrastructure and roadway digital infrastructure has really been emerging across our community, from ITSA, which you'll hear about in a little bit, from AASHTO, who's next on the speaking list. Everybody's been talking about where do we go next with our capabilities. And it's not just within the operations realm. The Office of Infrastructure within Federal Highways with their Better Information Management Program, the JPO with the National ITS Architecture, the Office of Secretary of Transportation with their Systems of Systems Architecture. All of us are looking at where are we going next around some of the digital capabilities of our transportation system. And that's just within the people that we know. If you look a little bit beyond our domains, you see similar efforts happening around electrification, around SAE, around NIST, some of the AI initiatives. There is this just growing sense that this is a renewed and shared strategic interest among all of us. So I have just 3 more slides, but this is the strategy in a nutshell. This is the 1-slide version of the strategy, and I'll just walk through this for a second here. Looking at the bottom circle here, those are what we call our foundations. Those are things we need to continue working on, build on the capabilities we have around public policy, around the architecture and data principles, around research, around workforce and business models. And you'll see some of the workshops today really start to get to that. But where do we go around sort of our research? How do we do research in the era where we have to rapidly move from prototyping to deployment and scaling? How do we build in new public policy considerations, be it cybersecurity, be it privacy, be it equity, into our digital infrastructure framework? So these foundations are critical to whatever we do, being interoperable, being equitable, being resilient and sustainable. We see 3 major capabilities that are catalysts to national roadway digital infrastructure, and those are the sort of interconnected rings in the middle, or the vortex, as we call it. And they really come from better information management at the agency, looking at the enterprise data systems, looking at geospatial data harmonization, and really simply collecting data once and using it as needed many, many times across there. So, and then interoperable connectivity, the idea of still filling in those connectivity gaps, leveraging the many sources of connectivity that's out there, and then sharing data seamlessly, not just from where you collect it, but across our ecosystem. So those are the 3 capabilities that drive this. Where we see these getting applied is in the top semicircles, where we have smart communities, the smart cities, the regional traffic management systems, and the efforts that are happening around our communities. What's also really taken hold is the idea of generating a consistent set of services across prototype transcontinental corridors, looking across an I-80 or an I-10 or an I-35 or an I-69, and sort of saying, here's what we want to consistently deliver and have available as services, and what are the sort of digital infrastructure needs around that. And ultimately, at the topmost circle, it would be something that really relates to how, at a national level, we measure system performance. How do we measure the capabilities of the national transportation system to support economic development, resilience, disasters? And what we really see the consistent national roadway digital infrastructure supporting is all these outcomes that we all hope to achieve that are in the top bar on top. So for each of these, we have several sample priorities. This is a work in progress, and part of what we do in the strategy is to build sort of the communities of practice around each of these foundations, leverage the existing activities that are going on as we move forward. So for foundations, it's really sort of establishing the principles of the next generation roadway digital infrastructure, looking at new collaborative models for research, supporting state DOT data governance efforts that really are critical to making that information useful within an agency, but also not ignoring the workforce. It's something that's really important for us as we look at the infrastructure owner-operators. What are the needs of the workforce to address some of the specific IT and DOT interactions? Similarly, if you look across the middle, the vortex, really looking at sort of the better information management strategic roadmap that the Federal Highway Office of Infrastructure is put together, leveraging some of the national data management efforts that are happening through Meyer and some of the more geospatial efforts. The National Transportation Resilience Data Programs really allow us to focus on ensuring that data is managed well within an agency, but really looking at sort of national data exchanges, looking at the ways that we can look at information communication and the connective tissue between all the work that happens at the state and DOT level. And of course, supporting sort of that NICT deployment plan to advance interoperability, especially through a safety lens. And then the application settings is really looking at how we can leverage all this investment that's already going on through SMART, Retain, and prioritizing interoperability and enterprise data management. The role of sort of traffic signal modernization, and looking at some early wins in transcontinental corridors and sort of national capacity around conditions and performance. So again, these priorities are evolving and will continue to evolve in the strategy. But again, to get a sense of that diagram and sort of moving forward with specific actions. Where we are is the idea that this strategy is a work in progress, but TRB 2024 is our important stake in the ground, where we do want to present very specific set of challenges that we can all take on. So where we are today is just a precursor to that event, and will be during our TRB workshop, which Valerie will talk about, walking through the strategy in a little bit more detail, but also highlighting where can we move forward in the near term, and what can we make progress on, going back to John's things of moving from strategy development to strategy implementation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Larry to talk a little bit about the AASHTO Moonshot initiative. I'm just pulling up your slides in a second.
Great. Thank you, Deepak. I'm Larry Dwyer, the Program Director for Operations at AASHTO. I'm going to talk about the AASHTO vision and Moonshot. I'm going to move through, in the interest of time, the vision piece fairly quickly, so we can spend a little bit more time talking about the Moonshot and what state DOTs are actually working on that. To start the vision process, we underwent a visioning exercise in 2021 and 2022. We looked at trends and uncertainties, everything from demographics to technology to risk and resilience. There's actually a visioning document on the AASHTO website, which is great to look at as a resource of kind of the groundwork we did to develop the vision. Next, we engaged partners. As you can see, everyone from all 50 state DOTs to private sector folks to academia to other interest groups and associations in Washington, D.C. to kind of get their perspective as we are building forward the vision. So what is the vision? The vision that was developed was community-centered transportation vision. It's on connecting communities, focused on moving people and goods and meeting customer needs at all scales. And this is important from local to global, and developed as a partnership between state DOTs and other public, private, and civic organizations. So getting into it, what really is the vision? We have aspirational goals on the next slide. And those goals are safe and secure, which means no fatalities or serious injuries to people using all modes of the transportation system, accessible and affordable, which means affordable and convenient transportation operations and options to access jobs, healthcare, education, food, recreation. Seamless and reliable, which means convenient, human-centered choices available on demand to move people and goods from origin to destination. Healthy and thriving transportation investments that help grow prosperity and improve the health of all Americans. Clean and sustainable, zero net emissions of greenhouse gases and air quality pollutants. And agile and resilient, and that's communities protected against and able to adapt to and recover from extreme weather events, climate trends, and be able to adapt to risks, disruptions, and other uncertainties. Moving on to the Moonshot initiatives, we had several on the next slide here. Making aggressive progress towards Vision Zero, safety, increase access to opportunity for Alice households, create a mobility marketplace that works for customers. Also on the next slide, we talked about deploying intelligent infrastructure along our major corridors, really focusing there on lighting up the interstate, as we talked about a little bit earlier, rethinking how we connect communities and regions and how we put communities in the center. The next slide kind of demonstrates what that might look like, envisioning a diagram or a picture of what that world might look like. And then moving on in the next slide to implementation and where we are. Moving forward with 13 applications, working with states to refine the concepts based on the panel feedback. I'll try and just focus in the interest of time here on some of the initial deployments on the technology focus, what we're most interested in here today. Nevada is looking at expanding I-80 coalition from California to the Northeast all the way to New Jersey, and really looking at piloting the next generation of multi-state corridor operations and data sharing. They're initially looking at sharing information on truck parking across that corridor, across the country. Utah is looking at installing broadband along the interstates in Utah to deploy and operate a broad range of digital devices and services. Texas is looking at establishing an innovation corridor on I-45. They're also looking to add into and transition to I-35 and the I-10 corridors. And there they're looking to advance real-time system operations and seamlessly connected environment. Georgia is looking at deploying connected vehicle technology and broadband along all the interstates in Georgia. And they're setting up a free P3 to provide open access. On the next slide, talking about some of the other deployments. Energy focus is in Minnesota and Michigan, and Minnesota is looking at expanding use of highway rights-of-way for transmission to support clean energy transition. Michigan is looking at how to study power combined charging ports along alternative fuel corridors, and they're also looking at finding ideal locations for roadside solar power plants. The access to opportunity focus states are Oklahoma, Michigan, and New Jersey. And Oklahoma is looking to implement a statewide mobility management program to address unmet mobility needs of vulnerable individuals. Michigan's looking at unifying state and federal funding sources for mobility services, creating a mobility marketplace. New Jersey is looking at impacts on asset limited, income constrained, and employed ALICE households for projects entering concept development. And they're looking at design elements that can benefit ALICE households. For community focus, that's in Washington State, and they're looking at combining planning for I-5 and the high-speed rail along the western corridor there, creating multimodal options and transform role of transportation in the surrounding communities. And then the safety focus is in South Dakota and also New Jersey. And South Dakota is looking to develop and deploy innovative rural measures to reduce serious injury and fatal crashes. New Jersey is looking at deploying a red clearance extension system to reduce conflicts between vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. So what's next as we move forward here? Moving forward with all the applications, we're going to refine the Moonshot concepts, working with the state DOTs some more, continue to engage with partners, both traditional and non-traditional. We're going to share the results and the resources with all the states. We're going to develop an approach for engaging states and partners. Further updates at upcoming AASHTO meetings, which would include the Washington briefing, the spring meeting, and other TRB and other upcoming meetings. That's a quick overview of the vision and the Moonshot efforts that AASHTO is engaged with and working with state DOTs across the country on. And next, I'd like to turn it over to Tim Drake from ITS America.
Thanks, Larry. Just bringing my screen up here. You should be able to see it now. I want to first off say good morning and thank you for inviting me to participate today and talk to you a little bit about ITS America's efforts on digital infrastructure. I am Tim Drake. I'm the Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Government Affairs at ITS America. And in that role, I manage our policy development, advocacy, and all of our committee activity, including our efforts related to DI. And I'm delighted to be here today to share a little bit about our recently published Digital Infrastructure Strategy Report as we look towards TRB and continuing the conversation there. This is not news to any of you, but our transportation system is evolving. It's no longer just concrete and asphalt and steel. Today, it includes sensors and software, data and algorithms, and numerous technologies that allow us to pursue automation, connected vehicles, mobility on demand, and a more sustainable and resilient transportation system. And in this new era of infrastructure, we will link that physical transportation system with a digital layer that allows us to gather, transmit, store, analyze, communicate, and share information in real time, and to use that information to increase safety, reduce congestion, reduce emissions, and enhance mobility for every transportation user. And I think that must really be our North Star. At ITS America, we don't advocate for deploying technology for technology's sake. We advocate for developing and deploying technology to provide real outcomes for real people. And in reality, technology and data already impacts much of the way we travel, but we've only begun to tap the potential of what digital infrastructure can provide. We at ITS America envision a future transportation system in which digital infrastructure incorporates all modes, bringing together highways and local roadways, transit, micromobility, curb space, freight, and yes, even aviation to provide seamless mobility opportunities. In our Digital Infrastructure Strategy Report, we included insights gleaned from numerous forums, workshops, and meetings of ITS America's Digital Infrastructure Working Group, and we appreciate the hundreds of industry stakeholders, public and private, that participated throughout that process. I believe the report can provide a foundation to push our collective conversation on digital infrastructure forward. I think it can help inform and contribute to FHWA's own efforts on roadway digital infrastructure, along with the efforts of other industry stakeholders, such as AASHTO's lighting up the Interstate Moonshot that Larry just discussed. Our digital infrastructure strategy report identifies 4 key areas that I think are crucial to advancing digital infrastructure. It begins a discussion on what a definition of digital infrastructure should include. It evaluates digital infrastructure through the lens of use cases. It discusses the need for broad stakeholder participation and collaboration, and it identifies next steps to begin to implement the strategy. I'm going to address each of these at a very high level. So first, what is digital infrastructure? We heard John speak to this a little bit, and I have a working definition on the right side of this slide that underpins some of the work that we've done. And while it identifies a plethora of the pieces that make up digital infrastructure, it's also likely incomplete. In reality, the definition of digital infrastructure is still under development. But I can tell you 4 key areas that we think the final definition should address. First, the technology and innovation, which includes the connectivity, dynamic transportation systems, and emerging technologies. Second, standards and a reference architecture, which will address data sharing and integration, cybersecurity, and interoperability and standardization. Third, stakeholders. And this includes the typical transportation stakeholders, but also public-private partnerships and a broader user base. And fourth, priorities and goals, including safety, sustainability, mobility, equity, and future-proofing. We also, we convened a workshop in April 2023 where we evaluated 10 critical digital infrastructure use cases that would be used to meet safety, equity, economic strength, and climate objectives. These use cases represent an initial blueprint for demonstrating digital infrastructure capabilities, but are not an exhaustive list of potential use cases. They can be used as a starting point to focus resource allocation, define and establish achievable milestones, and measure the potential and progress of digital infrastructure while achieving meaningful results for the traveling public, the outcomes piece. In the report, we provided an in-depth overview of 2 use cases, connected vehicle data and traffic signal integration, which we used in the report to identify obstacles to success and outline the necessary steps to mitigate them. Finally, we also addressed, the section in our report also addressed the need for a digital reference architecture and a shared data layer. I would note that there are a number of systems that will be included within digital infrastructure, and DI doesn't have to replace the many other standards that have been developed throughout the transportation system. Rather, it is a system of systems and will require incorporation of many of the architectures that have already been developed. I think the key is providing a functional architecture that allows for innovation, but also prioritizes interoperability. And the shared data layer must provide trustable data for stakeholders to use and build from. Next, we looked at stakeholder collaboration. I think this is one of the key areas towards alignment on digital infrastructure, is to correctly identify the complex stakeholder map and ensure we're bringing each of these communities into the conversation. We made an attempt to outline a stakeholder map here, which you can see involves numerous stakeholders with varying needs and responsibilities. It includes, at the bottom, US DOT and other federal agencies, state and local public entities, enabling organizations, digital infrastructure user interfaces, and the end users themselves. And as complex as this stakeholder map is, I'm sure it will need to be expanded and improved upon. The key point here is that these stakeholders all have a part to play in the development and implementation of digital infrastructure. Fourth and finally, we identified 11 key actions to implementing the strategy, including setting a common vision, establishing a roadmap with defined milestones, defining digital infrastructure, prioritizing relevant industry use cases, allocating funding for technology, developing a facilitated policy and regulatory framework, making a difference through real impacts, emphasizing citizen-centric changes, leveraging industry associations to foster collaboration, fostering partnerships and collaboration with industry stakeholders, and regularly reviewing and adapting digital infrastructure to meet technological innovation. It's a lot of steps, but I think each one will enhance our ability to deliver on digital infrastructure. And if you look through this list, you'll see that a number of these are already underway. in the efforts of FHWA, AASHTO, and ITS America. So finally, what's next? ITS America made a call on US DOT to develop a DI vision and roadmap. We need a vision that defines digital infrastructure, identifies US DOT and industry goals and priorities around digital infrastructure, and provides a framework for development to a common end result while allowing room for innovation and improvement. ITS America this year, our digital infrastructure working group is becoming a full standing advisory committee. It will be tasked with a number of activities to advance digital infrastructure implementation. The first of which will include identifying what should be included in a common national vision for DI, including a framework under which we can all participate in its development. Second, we will look to advance a multimodal use case ecosystem that shows how DI can be implemented across a broad range of modalities and use cases, including a discussion of standardization and reference architecture to support a seamless transportation system. And third, we will begin to develop policy that will underpin the future of digital infrastructure in federal transportation programs, recognizing the need to put digital infrastructure on par with hard infrastructure in the next surface transportation reauthorization and address the unique nature of technology procurement. Finally, we look forward to participating in the Digital Infrastructure Workshop at TRB, and we'll look to build on those efforts at another DI workshop at ITS America's annual conference and expo on April 22nd in Phoenix. I'd also like to mention in a related effort, later this afternoon, we will be releasing a white paper on artificial intelligence in transportation. And I'd encourage everyone to be on the lookout for that as well. Thanks, Deepak.
Thank you, Tim. If you can stop sharing, I'll sort of share. Thank you. Let me just get my screen back and we'll get going. All right. So thanks for the presentations, Larry and Tim, and hopefully you all got a sense of some of the commonalities that are emerging. Appreciate sort of the work that ITS America has done. What we wanted to do was to show that many of these activities that are included in these strategy documents are being addressed by very different groups of people that are working within their efforts. So we have 4 workshops, and there are probably many, many, many more workshops and activities in TRB that we could have identified, but we wanted to kind of showcase these 4 workshops with some direct connections. So there's one on roadway exchanges that Mike Haas is going to talk about that directly ties to some of the strategic elements around exchanges and platforms, transcontinental corridors, operations, and sort of national system performance. Traffic management systems really gets to that operations, both freeways and arterials, especially at the sort of the community and corridor levels. The IT and OT workshop really talks about sort of better information management, but also interoperable connectivity and data exchanges. And then Valerie will talk about sort of where we're going next with our strategy as well. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike Haas.
All right, thank you, Deepak. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning where I am. It looks like it's still morning for most of you. So the challenge of these types of presentations for me is that I spend too much time listening to all the pieces that go before it, and so I'd organize my thoughts about sharing a little bit about this workshop, and now I'd rather make arguments or dialogue. Oh, please go to the next slide. That's fine.
I'm sorry. Are you in? I think this is the difference. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. Well, thank you to John while we're getting this queued up for a great new holiday tradition idea. As he mentioned, we're doing this live, but then there's going to be a recording, and he suggested that a number of folks will be watching this over the holidays. And so was thinking this weekend I'll get the family together and put a log on the fire and go back and watch all the transportation webinars that I missed over the last year, and maybe make that next year's Christmas card picture. So appreciate that, John. The workshop that we're hosting is 1003 on Sunday morning. It is the data exchange workshop, and we've kind of throw a label on that of the on-ramps to the national roadway digital infrastructure. It's being hosted by the regional TSMO committee, are sponsored, and the ITS committees within TRB. Go ahead and slide to the next slide. Critical issues we're looking at data exchanges. This is a continuation of a dialogue that we started last year. We had a workshop Sunday morning in 2023, where the issue that we wanted to address at that point was just that there were these emerging concepts that were being looked at by state, federal, and regional levels of systems to be procured and deployed today. So these weren't research concepts. These were actual real operational systems that people were building or buying. And there was a bit of uncertainty or confusion, you know, that we in the Data for Operations Subcommittee were kind of seeing in our relationships with the community, where the question is just, what are these things? Well, what is a data exchange? Why would I need one? And you know, what's the value that we expect to get out of these as we're trying to improve safety and mobility on the roadways? So we looked at that question last year, and to our surprise, had a very full room and ended up with more questions and dialogue than we had time to address in 3 hours. And so we kind of took the hint with that, participated in a number of the initiatives, you know, at arts and webinars over the last year, and decided to continue that conversation in 2024. And so the critical issues that we're looking at there are, you know, stated that there's inconsistent and unreliable data, making it harder to take advantage of it and leverage it fully. That there's not still good understanding of what a data exchange is and why I might need one. And then we're focusing specifically on data exchange mapping, digital mapping as a core enabler for data exchanges. So just as a data exchange, getting, you know, an exchange is a transaction. So a data exchange is getting information to and from people that have it and need it. And just as that's a key enabler for roadway digital infrastructure, the underlying mapping data, which is evolving very quickly as well, you know, will be a critical enabler for data exchanges. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we broke this workshop into 2 parts. Morning piece, or the initial piece, is kind of focused on what's happening on the public side, with John Corbin from Federal Highways, Todd Peterson talking about the the data exchange initiative. So the work zone data exchange work that's been ongoing for the last few years is now evolving into a set of different opportunities to look at roadway weather, event management, and Todd continues to lead that evolution. And although there's been, you know, some discussion in our workshops about the difference between a data exchange and a data feed specification, rather than trying to use those different words to separate and segregate the different initiatives, it really is all related to the same undertaking of trying to get information to and from folks that need it. And in the second half of the session, we're focusing more exclusively on mapping. NUV from TxDOT has been working on building a different type of collaborative team, public and private sector, to determine how to better leverage innovations in mapping that are taking place, both at the private sector coalition level of new mapping ideas that are spanning more than just one individual vendor, as well as talking with the individual map providers. And then we also have Eric Kolb from Google and Doug Gilmore from TomTom that will be speaking about what they see as the evolution of their products. Next. And the justification and thought process behind drilling down a little bit on maps is, like I said, it's an underlying pillar, a key foundation piece for a data exchange in transportation. But it also is part of an long-standing ongoing history that spans centuries, that if you want to see innovation in transportation, the innovations in mapping have always been hand in hand. You know, there was a time when latitude and longitude was invented to help people get from one continent to another when they weren't sure how to do that in a consistent way. More recently, with the digital mapping, realizing what the power of smartphones are, you know, has revolutionized how people travel just in the last decade. And as we're moving forward, you you know, if we could see the investment of growing from a $20 billion market today to a $90 billion market over the next decade, there's going to be fantastic changes in what capabilities mapping provides. So that really is my pitch to try to encourage you to join us. These data exchanges, all 4 of them, are about you know, the reality that there isn't going to be a solution dictated or provided or figured out by anybody else. That's something that we're all going to need to work on, and we're trying to be a part of that process, encouraging the dialogue, inviting people to come and either ask questions or answer questions or participate in identifying research needs. And we hope you're able to join us. Thank you.
Pete, you're next.
Yeah, hello everybody and good morning. Pete Marshall here, a member of the TRB ITS committee, and I want to tell you about another workshop at TRB that's directly related to digital infrastructure. It's called Preparing, Conducting, and Summarizing the Results, Assessing Traffic Management Systems, and it's number 1004. It's on Sunday. From 9 to 12 in Ballroom C. Ballroom C is kind of a non-traditional place for some of these. It's all the way up the escalator from the big TRB logo sign on the top level. So this workshop is organized by the TRB ITS committee with a lot of support and sponsorship from a number of other TRB committees. And other organizations that are listed here, I want to make sure we mention those, the Freeway Ops Committee, Traffic Signal Systems, AI and Advanced Computing, Active Traffic Management, Regional Transportation System Management and Operations, AASHTO Committee on Operations on the ITS Work Group, the Traffic Management Pooled Funds Study, ASCAP, IBTTA, and ERTICO for European partners. And so what that means is there's a lot of input into the content from across the spectrum of interests. And so this workshop is actually a continuation of something we've done for a couple of years with at TRB. So if you've attended any of the previous sessions, you know that they've been really well tended and really productive. And so some of the critical issues and workshop objectives that we're going to be addressing, you know, traffic management systems are really firmly rooted within the definition of scope and of transportation-related digital infrastructure. And assessing the effectiveness of a TMS is necessary with the, you know, as we're all aware, the rapidly evolving technical landscape which we find ourselves in today. As was already mentioned, you know, it's not just the physical assets located in the field, such as camera signs, other devices, but you know, communications and computer systems that power them, but also the soft assets, the digital layers, you know, with historical traffic data, response plans, history of actions taken that really inform traffic management study. And the purpose of this workshop is to frame the discussion of who, why, and how of assessing traffic management systems is accomplished, collaborating with all the attendees on best practices, knowledge gaps, and identifying ongoing activities to bridge some of those gaps. And the critical issues and workshop objectives that we're going to focus on are covered on a slide here. I'll let you read those, but I'd particularly like to highlight the relevance of examining the TMS planning process in this period of rapid technological advances. So if you can attend the webinar, if you've got some best practices from planning upgrades and procurements for agencies that have done that recently, that would be a big contribution to what we're trying to accomplish. So the agenda for the workshop is divided into 4 working sessions with a perspective summary from all the different sponsoring committees to wrap up at the end. Session 1 will start with 4 framing presentations to provide an overview and context of the assessment process and content. And then session 2 and 3, which is really the heart of this, is an extended breakout session, which participants will have roundtable discussions about specific aspects and categories of TMS assessments, as well as report back key issues to consider, successful practices, needed resources, and then session 4 will be an action planning effort to prioritize the next steps and identify topics of research and consideration in the industry. Just a brief little more detail about the overview. The 4 framing presentations in session 1 are intended to provide an overview of the purpose and need for assessing TMSs, as well as drill down into actually preparing for and conducting an assessment, and then wrap up with an approach for identifying opportunities for improving based on the assessment results. So myself, Dan Lukasik, John McAdam, and Matt Junek will be the presenters there. And these framing presentations are progressively more detailed as they go down the list, focused on planning for an assessment and the opportunity for improvements. And then on the next slide, again, this sessions 2 and 3 are really the heart of this. We'll split up all the participants into smaller groups that meet their interest, and discuss and consider, 1 of 6 critical topics that should be part of a TMS assessment, and they're listed there 1 through 6. Preparing for and conducting the assessment, opportunities for improvements, business process and technologies, performance and workforce, culture and collaboration, and then management and operations. And those would be 45-minute discussions, I believe, and all ideas and suggested generated by the breakout groups will be recorded, and the top 3 to 5 issues under each topic reported back to the entire workshop by the individual groups. So the anticipated outcomes and action planning, we'll have a short brainstorming session then to sort of wrap things up, and that'll identify possible priorities for sponsoring TRB committees to advance in line with the top issues identified from the breakout groups. And during the previous workshops that we've had on this over the last couple of years, some of the things that have emerged and activities are shown here on how they could bubble up and kind of get into the mainstream through more TRB engagement. The NOCO website is a source for distributing information. The pooled fund studies could be a source of research, and then just a chance to explore partnerships, to propose, sponsor, and conduct research in this topic on TMS. So just to sum it up, this is going to be an action-packed workshop, I'm sure, with lots of robust and in-depth discussion on digital infrastructure-related topics, specifically TMS systems. In the past, we have a great attendance and participation and excitement, and we expect the same this year. So I hope you'll attend and participate. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Vishali for the next workshop.
Good morning, almost good afternoon. I know we are running behind. I hope you can stay with us for another 10 minutes or so as I and Valerie deliver information on our respective workshops. So again, good morning. I'm Vaishali Shah, the Director of Transportation Systems Operations at Applied Enterprise Management, or AEM, and a member of the TRB Freeway Operations Committee. So on behalf of our committee and the 4 co-sponsoring committees, we welcome you to take part in this 1:30 p.m. workshop. We believe it's very well timed, relevant, and impactful in that we strive to help our participants foster a better collaboration between information technology and our operations groups. Next slide, please. So the goal of this workshop is to help overcome some of the disconnects in the working relationships between IT and OT. Our workshop is not starting from scratch. There's already some work in terms of IT and TSMO coordination. One great resource is the research recently completed by the Federal Highway Administration on the coordination of IT and TSMO, and this work was led by Jim Hunt and includes some easily digestible fact sheets and 2 webinars based on the reference document Practices for Improving the coordination of information technology and TISMO. So Luana has put the link for this resource on the chat pod. So why should you attend this workshop amongst the dozens of other workshops? And what will you learn, and how will your participation help peers? Well, we've formulated this workshop with a focus on practical use. By attending, we hope you're going to learn from experts and peers a handful of creative strategies for improving the IT and business line collaboration. So whether that business line is operations, asset management, planning, safety, or other, it's about understanding the new needs and requirements from both the IT and the line of business side. By attending, we hope to clarify the different challenges and opportunities working with IT service providers, whether it be within the organization's operations group, at the Department of Transportation level, that enterprise level, or at the governor's office of IT level. We'll discuss how these groups influence operations delivery of services, whether it's traveler information, ramp metering, maintenance, traffic incident management, traffic signal systems, or many of the other operational strategies. We'll also discuss what's around the corner for IT and operations efforts. So hopefully by attending, you'll be able to form new connections with peers that you can carry forward with you beyond TRB. Next slide, please. The other thing we hope to do, well, let me just say, how's this workshop organized? We'll start with a brief 5-minute, 5-question input form that is now live. So this form targets IT staff and operations staff to share their challenges, priorities, good practices, and anecdotes. We want to hear both from the IT and operations side, so we kindly ask that you get us, you help us get the word out regarding this form, and we ask you to fill it as well, so you could use the QR code or the link in the chat pod. We'll use this to jumpstart the conversations, and if you share your craziest story or experience and we spotlight you, you will get a prize, a small prize at the workshop. So hope you can take a moment to do that. And based on that, we have 3 parts to this workshop. The first is an operations and IT panel. It includes presentations, conversations, and role-playing. The second part will be breakout groups, and you'll get to participate in 2 of 6. And then the third part will be on prioritizing research needs. So next slide. Who's in part 1? We have 3 individuals that wear the IT hat: Stephen Pritchard, the IT manager and chief information security officer at the New Jersey State Department of Transportation, and Brian Kepler, who is with the New Jersey Office of Information Technology. Their agency is responsible for the policies and standards governing the state's various agencies' use of technology across all of the departments, whether it's transportation, education, labor, health, and many others. And we have Murali Rao, former VDOT CIO and technologist. And then on the operations side, we have Sal Cowan, the Senior Director of Transportation Mobility with New Jersey DOT, Lee Smith, who is on this webinar now, Tennessee DOT's Director of Traffic Operations, and Dean Gustafson, former State Operations Engineer at VDOT. So these 6 folks are going to highlight how they collaborate, where they've butted heads, and how they're improving their working relationships to more safely and cost-effectively deliver TISMO services. And at least 2 of these 6 individuals have agreed to do some role-playing, and all 6 of them will support a Q&A after briefly highlighting their agencies and agencies' IT and operations interactions. Next slide. So, second part of the workshop, we have 6 sets of practitioners that are going to do a rapid fire pitch to highlight in 2 to 3 minutes some of the opportunities and challenges. So for example, Jennifer Portanova is going to talk about who's in charge of procurement. How do you collaboratively define the testing and acceptance criteria for your procurement effort? What are some of the unwritten rules for procurement, both from an operations and IT perspective? So all of these 6 breakout groups focus on the interaction between TISMO and IT when you are doing X, when you are doing security, when you're doing data management and governance, accessibility of systems and data. So you get to go to 2 of these 6 groups, and depending on what groups you go to will hopefully help identify some of the priorities, and then what you discuss in the breakout groups will then lead into part 3. Next slide. And that part 3 of the workshop is on future research needs and the future in terms of the roles and responsibilities between IT and operations groups. And we will use some interactive polling. And with that, last slide, I wanted to say that this is a group effort and recognize all of the folks that are taking part. And once again, I invite and encourage you to attend, 1, the workshop. IT won't let me do my work, and operations will sync our networks. Hopefully, IT will be incredibly supportive after the workshop, or is incredibly supportive in doing your work as an operations hat, and operations will not sync our networks. It will keep us secure and provide continuity of services. And then again, please fill out the brief survey. We'll see you January 7th, 1:30 p.m. Salon B. Over to you, Valerie.
All right, thank you, Vaishali. Just wanted to introduce myself real briefly here. Valerie Schumann Consulting Group. I am a member of the ICF team that was referred to a few times at the beginning of this event, that's been working on RDI with John Corbin. Wanted to say a happy Wednesday. I see we've got a global audience here, so thanks to all the folks who are staying up late or getting up early to join us. In addition to everyone joining us during a busy holiday season. I'll keep this real crisp because I know we want to get to Q&A. But this is a very brief overview of the workshop that we're going to be holding on Thursday. So not competing with all of the Sunday workshops. This is Thursday morning at the TRB Annual Meeting. And of course, anyone who is an attendee is welcome to join. So that'll be Thursday, also in Salon C. It's going to be a popular spot. This is also sponsored by a number of TRB standing committees. Won't list them all, but we'll slight plug for ACP 30 that I am a member of, which is the Vehicle Highway Automation Group, but also, of course, the ITS committee and all the other ones. Thank you very much for all your support on that. Next slide, please. So, critical issues and workshop objectives. This workshop is a dedicated part of the activity that was described at the beginning of this workshop to help improve our ability to deliver on national goals for our transportation system by collaboratively evolving our nation's RDI systems. It builds on the workshop last year. Last year, we launched initial strategy development. This year, we're going to launch something new, actually doing something about the strategy, executing on some key areas. So our objectives are to add to industry awareness of national RDI strategies. You heard some very brief overviews of a couple of those here this morning. There will be more strategy insight to share at the workshop. And then we will actually launch industry collaboration around 5 challenges for 2024. So next slide, I'll get into the more detail there. So when we say launch collaboration, what do we mean? Everyone in the room will be sort of part of the team that looks at 3 questions for each challenge. Question 1, what specific targets can we deliver in 2024? There's work going on in all of the challenge areas already, and there has been. This is our opportunity to take it to the next level in the next 12 months. So we're specifically looking at initial targets that we can deliver. The next one, of course, is who is going to participate in getting that done. So we're looking for folks to step up, folks to maybe point to others, make sure we understand who the community is, who's really going to come together around making all this happen. And the last piece, what resources have we already got? We tend to sit and wait for resources. But we think that there's a lot already out there that we can build on. So we're looking for folks to help us, make that list. And very importantly, in the same way that this workshop has built on 2023, we expect another workshop in 2025 where we will actually report on the targets. So we're not just setting targets to set targets, we're setting targets to allow ourselves to organize ourselves and get something done over the next 12 months. So the agenda, I won't spend too much time going over this in too much detail, but we will have a welcome and introduction from Egan Smith and John Corbin. We will have a panel with folks from a variety of organizations sharing strategy perspectives. So you heard from Tim Drake this morning, but you will also be hearing from colleagues at USDOT. You also heard from Larry Dwyer this morning, but you'll hear more detail from him there. On the AASHTO view, you'll be hearing from Jim Meisner about 5G AA's thinking, and also from Ed Straub about SAE. Then we will dive into the 2024 challenges. No, I'm not going to share them now. You'll have to come to the workshop and find out what they are. But if you look at the names of the folks here who are each going to share updates, insights, and guidance on those different challenges, you'll probably get some idea of the kinds of things we're going to be talking about. Then we will dive right into the group activity. Everyone in the room will have a chance to walk to the zone for the challenge that is of most interest to them or challenges, and help us answer those 3 questions. And we'll wrap up with a brief summary from Deepak and some closing and thanks from John. So one last slide here, and I can hand it back. Our anticipated outcomes and learning objectives, we are certainly looking to raise industry awareness of the national RDI strategy work that's going on, and also to launch work on those 2024 challenges. For each challenge, we'll be looking for that stakeholder input on targets, contributors, and resources, and we will absolutely be using that to help pull our communities together and get going. So thank you for the opportunity to share this. I want to hand it back to Deepak and get us as close to back on schedule as I can. Thank you.
Well, thank you. But we are right on schedule, 12:10, and we have 20 minutes for questions and a couple of polls. So thank you for all the workshop participants. I'll put the workshop slide again if you need to take a picture of the look at the number. It's obviously in the program. Luana, do you want to pull up the couple of polls we have for the audience? For the next few minutes, we'll have about 3 questions that are polls, and Luana will run them, and then we'll sort of start diving through the questions one by one. So there are 2 questions here in terms of what are some of the next steps you'd like to hear, and I think more importantly for us, I already see some comments from Israel and others in terms of what we still are missing and do we have any gaps or topics that are near and dear to your heart that we need to highlight. So we'll give each a minute for us to respond to these polls, and then we'll switch over. And as people are putting answers in the polls, please do either in the chat pod or in the question and answer pod, please post your questions. I have a list here that I'll be going through based on the chat, but if there's any other items, we'll sort of, this is a good time to start putting some questions in the chat pod as well. So maybe another 30 seconds, Luana, and then we can maybe bring thoughts. All right. And Luana, I assume we'll share the answers later. Do you want to bring up the second poll as well, or however you want to run it? Yeah, there we go. So this one this is new for us. This is almost like a preview of these TRB workshops, and trying to coalesce different workshops around sort of an organizing theme. We wanted to ask you, are there other things we could do? And in particular, are there groups, committees, organizations that we should prioritize? We already saw some around NIST, but I'm going to give you all a couple of seconds on feedback on how else and who else should we be reaching out to as we start putting some of this material out. And you saw this great stakeholder map from Tim as well. So just another 30 more seconds. And then we have one more question, which is pretty important for all the workshop hosts, at least. So, all right, Luana, the next one. There's a last poll question. And this one, a lot of our efforts, we have an agenda, but we definitely need more people around these workshops to help facilitate, participate in breakout group, engage. We can find roles for you, especially if you're interested in a topic, if you're interested in sort of saying, hey, I'd like to know more and be more of an active participant in these events. We'd encourage your participation. So you can select multiple workshops, of course. 1003 and 1004 are sort of at the same time, but if you can clone yourself, sure. But for other workshops, you can select more than one workshop in this list, and we'll reach out to you over the next few weeks to figure out where we're going next. But appreciate any volunteering that you might all be able to do around the TRB sessions. All right. So as that question closes, I'd like to sort of get us started on some questions. I'll start with Israel's question and comment around cybersecurity in the architecture, being more explicit about cybersecurity as a tenant, and sort of including maybe ways to sort of advance things and some suggestions, including safe and secure systems. So maybe, John, do you want to maybe offer a few thoughts on cybersecurity? And then Vishali, maybe a quick comment on whether you're going to be addressing some of the cybersecurity type issues in your workshop as well.
Yeah, and also I also want to note Lee's question about putting the time and date for the 4 workshops, which we'll make sure to do before we wrap up. We'll repeat that. But no, I think it's a great point. And my chat pod reaction, Israel, to your perspective was I tend to agree. Public policy maybe a little bit broad and a little bit vague, too vague perhaps to capture the significance of particularly the need to assure cybersecurity, privacy, and also equity, digital equity, I think becoming appropriately and increasingly an intensely relevant issue. And my stream of consciousness reaction was maybe we need to introduce some sort of iron ring around that on-ramp vortex that's at the center of this to confirm that we're not only aware of some of those critical value-based considerations, but recognize them as central. So I think that's a great point. I just also would acknowledge and also applaud Deepak and Valerie and others that have been part of the team evolving this strategy. that we're probably at the edge of what we can accomplish with a graphic as far as density and complexity. So hopefully some of this teases engagement in the more substantive, ultimately nimble documentation of the strategy, which will have to be kind of dynamic, or if you will, living in its nature. So again, great points. And I encourage, by the way, people to continue to use the chat pod for feedback all the way up to the end of this conversation.
That's good.
Yeah.
And Vaishali, go ahead.
Deepak, to your point, yeah, the workshop between IT and OT collaboration will definitely delve into security as a whole, both physical and cybersecurity, because I think one of the challenges, cybersecurity is absolutely a concern in everything we do. But when we're talking about operations, we can't forget the physical security as well. We have so many devices and technologies and fiber that's out there physically. And so we have to look at both angles. And so that is a topic that is going to be led by Stephen Pritchard, who is the CISO at New Jersey DOT. And we have a couple of other experts in the room that are wearing that IT hat that will bring to bear some of their thoughts and helping operations groups make sure that we focus on both aspects of security.
Yep. Thank you, Vaishali. And so just give me a moment on. I'm going to answer. Lee has two questions. I'm going to answer the start with the question for Larry. Lee Smith asks, is there an opportunity to apply to be part of the AASHTO Moonshot initiative? So that's a question for you, Larry, and then we'll jump to the other question that Lee had.
That's a good question, and I think the next phase, we're going to be looking at other states that are interested in the moonshots going forward. So I would say stay tuned on that and look for more to come on that.
Yep. And then Lee, to your question about operations, where freeway and arterial, I totally get sort of Tismo, but we really have baked it into the whole diagram, and really sort of that application setting around smart communities and prototype corridors is where sort of we see the operations programs really being part. And it sort of connects to all the things below that, right? You need the interoperable connectivity, you need the roadway exchange and better information management. So it's baked in. It might be sort of, as we sort of describe some of these things, the role of operations and TISMO will be really sort of evidently clear. And I think John can comment to that as well. Tim Drake, you have a hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Deepak. I just wanted to address the cyber question as well in the context of ITS America's Digital Infrastructure Strategy Report. While it wasn't front and center on my presentation today, there are a number of places within the report that we address the need for cyber. This includes within the definition of digital infrastructure itself in the standards and reference architecture piece, as well as we have a use case focused on cybersecurity, and in one of our use cases that we did a full analysis of, which is the CV data use case, there's a pretty robust discussion of the cybersecurity needs. So while it wasn't on the slides today, it certainly is included within our report, and I agree that it's an important issue.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, and Mark, I don't know if you know John, or this is a question that's near and dear to John, and John's mentioned this many times. So John, this is for you. Is there a role for digital airspace in the RDI equation?
Yeah, I used all caps in part of my response to that. So yeah. I mean, and we're excited. I mean, one of many entities within US DOT that is on par with some of the rest of us as far as passion and interest is the highly automated system safety, or highly Haas Center of Excellence, and Sarah Cena and others in that organization, of course, are recognized experts in this space. And so, yes, we are pursuing and hold us accountable for advancing both internal to US DOT, but also collaboratively with those of you on this call, including industry, I think, Tim, through ITS America, that can inform our emerging knowledge of this three-dimensional integration architecturally, which is being addressed so far almost exclusively from the air side, and so I think we've got a hand reaching out to us literally from above, that we can reach up to, and we'll need to do that. And I'm looking forward to that happening at TRB.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And again, there's obviously a lot more questions and a lot more ideas on how they can be integrated, but I do see the connections are emerging. A couple of quick questions, Joe. Tim Drake answered your questions around the link for the AI white paper. When that comes in, it'll be released through the ITS America media channels. Thank you for your interest. And then Israel, it's a question maybe for Mike Haas around sort of your workshop, but probably also for a lot of us around the role of data exchanges for ITS data. Why aren't we requiring the use of the TMDD? And any thoughts or comments? And open it up to others on the group to address that as well. We're starting with Mike.
Sure. I would make an observation that there isn't anybody in a position to require anything at this point, because there's so many different facets from which data exchanges are being approached. I think that trying to stand on the shoulders of the work that's already been done, the TMDD and the new work that's going into the next version, there's a lot of value there. But I think the other problem with standards in technology in general is the challenge of keeping up with what's innovative. There may be information that we wish to exchange now that won't be accommodated in a standard for some time. And so it's always a balance of what value can we get versus how do we avoid, the messiness of not being standards compliant. So it's a great question. And I think the answer is it's being done in a lot of different places concurrently. And so it's not something we can really regulate that tightly at this point.
Any others commenting on that issue before we?
So
I would just go ahead, Valerie.
So you knew I had to jump in just a little bit.
Yep.
One of the things that I think we are talking about, there is always the challenge of, there's a selected standard, maybe it doesn't have everything you want, maybe there's a different standard that some other people like. One of the key things that we can do as we look at standardizing what we're doing is require in the metadata to people just simply say what standard you're using. So you do get a situation where if somebody wants to use ISO this and the other person wants to use SAE that, at least your computable systems, machine readable systems know what they're looking at, what they're translating to or from. So I think there's some techniques that we have the opportunity to use that will allow us to leverage all of the standards work that has gone on, because you're right, Mike, there's 30 years of standards work in there, and allow us to leverage it without constraining ourselves.
Thank you. Just a few more thoughts. We have about 3 minutes. I just wanted to highlight the chat pod for those of you that are looking at it. There's just a whole host of links available, both sort of workshops, the committees. So I encourage you, if you haven't clicked through the links, to just skim through the chat pod. It's one of the more active chat pods we've had in webinars, so I appreciate that. And then I do want to highlight the link that Vaishali shared around the IT/OT operations pre-workshop form. They are looking for stories to really drive the workshop. So if you have stories, especially if you're in the state DOT operations side or IT side, hey, this thing didn't work, it took us 3 years, they didn't really get it. I think those stories would really help them in the workshop as well. So the link is there, and looking for panels as well. So I don't see any other questions and comments. There was one around, yes, we are, Israel, to your question about NIST, John and others are engaging, and through other forms of other groups within USDOT engaging with NIST around their cyber physical systems and work as well. Any other comments? Any other feedback? John, some closing remarks or any other from the panels before we end right on time?
Yeah, and I'll just say I appreciate Mike Haas raising the imagery of people listening to this recording, around the Christmas tree in front of the fire or other holiday decorations. I shout out across the Atlantic to our Austrian brother Martin Russ, who I noted is joining in, and I'm envisioning that beautiful winter Alpen landscape in Austria, and be that as it may, however you've engaged and enjoyed this webinar or subsequently savor it by recording, I just want to thank Deepak, you for your leadership, Luana for your guidance and support in planning and delivering this. Each of the panelists and speakers, I realize, all of us get paid for employer-based transactions. A lot of our involvement in TRB, including this webinar, I know extends beyond that. So thank you so much for making this possible. And equally thanks again to those that took time to join this webinar and begin to prepare for engaging with us at the TRB annual meeting. It will be I believe, a transformational meeting and a very meaningful event. Final thing I'll just say is I am privileged to work for the US DOT. I just want you to know there is rapidly growing high-level supportive management interest in this topic. So it is not just kind of volunteer, hopeful, working level engagement of the topic. US DOT at very meaningful levels, well above mine, are supportively interested in this and are empowering many of us to take action and collaborate with you moving forward towards deployment and not just discussion of digital infrastructure. With that, thank you again, Deepak, and thanks, Luana. Have a great rest of the day.
All right, thank you so much, Luana. Thank you for helping us host this.
Thank you, all speakers. Thank you for moderating, Deepak, and we look forward to seeing you at TRB. Have a great day.